The wind moaned through the hollow ribs of an old solar hauler, its rusted frame leaning like a corpse against the slope of the dune. Eugene sat nearby, knees pulled up, the flicker of his fire casting shadows that swayed and danced like memories. Across the cracked dirt, the fire was small, built low between stones, more for warmth than light. Too much brightness drew eyes in the wastelands, and not all eyes blinked with mercy. His fingers worked a multi-tool across the edge of a bent solar plate, trying to sharpen it down to something that could slice through old wire mesh. The plate kept catching, slipping. He grunted and scraped harder. Behind him, his patched-up tarp snapped in the wind like a tired flag. Above, the sky churned with orange haze, the stars mostly smothered by the dust storms that never truly left this part of the world. He'd learned long ago not to trust quiet. Not out here. When the land went still, it was either holding its breath or watching. A low growl rolled across the clearing. Not a machine glitch. Not wind moaning through metal. It was alive. Eugene froze, fingers still gripping the plate. The sound had weight. It wasn't close, but it wasn't far either. He let the tool drop into the dirt beside him, quiet and deliberate, and reached for the pulse flare on his belt. He didn't light it. He just held it. The growl came again, rough, strained, like gravel being dragged through a dry throat. Not aggressive. Not yet. He stood, slow and silent, turning toward the sound. Past the fire, past the ring of scavenged scrap, lay a tangle of wreckage and thorn brush. And in the middle of it, half covered in ash and shadow, something moved. A shape, crouched low, breathing fast. Eugene took one step forward, then another. No sudden movement, no words, no weapon drawn. The shape resolved into a form. Humanoid. But not human. Fur, blackened with soot and blood, clung to long limbs drawn in tight. Yellow eyes reflected the firelight like twin blades. Two short horns curled from beneath matted hair, twitching ears swiveling in his direction. Her chest rose and fell in sharp bursts. One leg was soaked in blood. A long gash traced her ribs. Still, she didn't run. Didn't whimper, just stared. Like a wounded animal too tired to strike, but too proud to beg. Eugene crouched low, maybe 20 feet away. He didn't speak, didn't gesture. He just cracked a small flare and placed it on the ground between them. Its soft blue light spread slowly, easier on the eyes than firelight. She flinched at the sudden glow, a hiss escaping. Her teeth but didn't move. From his vest he drew a med patch. Sealed, clean, and set it gently beside the flare. Then he stood, stepped back, once, twice, returned to his fire like he hadn't seen anything at all. He didn't look at her again. Not directly. He'd learned years ago that words meant nothing in first contact. Trust didn't start with noise. It started with silence, with distance, and the choice to close it. He ate the rest of his ration bar slowly, staring into the flames. Behind him, minutes passed. Then he heard it, a drag of something over dirt. He glanced sideways, careful not to shift his weight too suddenly. The creature, woman, had moved, not close, but closer, into the edge of the blue light, crouched, still watching him. Her hand reached for the med patch. Didn't use it, not yet, but took it. A moment later, she approached the second thing he'd left. The rations. She opened the package with fingers that shook only slightly, and ate, not like a starving beast, but like someone who remembered how to survive when nobody else was left to care. He didn't ask her name, didn't offer his. The fire cracked between them. The wind died down just enough to hear her breath. Slow, still wary, but present. She didn't run when she finished. Didn't fade back into the dark. She sat, not close enough to touch, not close enough to speak, but close enough to feel the warmth. The fire had burned low by dawn, reduced to a halo of red embers tucked beneath blackened wood and curling ash. Eugene stirred first, wincing as he pushed himself up from the packed dirt. His muscles ached from stillness, not effort, a strange ache for a man used to twitching at every shadow. For the first time in weeks, he'd slept more than he meant to. He blinked toward the quiet form across the fire. The beastwoman was still there. She hadn't moved far in the night. She lay curled in on herself beneath the blanket he'd tossed. Her limbs tangled, tail tucked tightly in, face turned just enough that one golden eye could watch him if she needed to. He hadn't heard her approach last night, hadn't felt her come that close. But now she was just 3 long steps away, and she hadn't run. His breath misted as he leaned forward and coaxed the fire back to life with dry twigs and crushed seed. Husks. The flames sparked reluctantly, flaring orange across her fur. She didn't flinch, not even when the fire crackled. She was already awake, waiting. He pulled out a canteen and took a swig, then set it near the fire. She didn't reach for it, but her nose twitched. She was hungry. Again, and cautious. Again. Eugene reached into his pack and unwrapped the last of his boiled tubers. Not much, but enough to split. He placed one half on the flat rock where she'd eaten before, then stood and walked a short distance away, not looking back, pretending to check the tarp seams for tears. He heard her move, slow, deliberate, the sound of her feet on dust, claws on stone. Then the quiet shuffle of her crouching again. He turned. Just a little, enough to see her unwrapping the food, her eyes still on him, her shoulders still high and tight. This was still a battlefield, one without blood, but just as dangerous. He let her eat in silence. A few hours later, the wind picked up, dragging red dust across the ridge like a living thing. They worked in tandem without speaking, securing the walls with spare scrap and extra vines, tying off the tarp corners where they flapped too loud. He handed her a length of wire when she reached for it, and she took it without growling. That was new. As they worked, his eyes drifted to the long gash on her side. It was crusted over now, but deep, ragged, not clean like a blade torn, like something with teeth or claws had done it. He wondered if it had been part of her escape, or if she'd been hunted. She caught him looking, her head tilted, ears twitching, not threatening, just measuring. He didn't apologize, just stepped closer slowly and held out a new med patch. Her eyes locked on his, unblinking. She didn't take it, didn't refuse it either. He knelt, careful, and placed it on the crate beside her, then turned away. Gave her space. When he glanced back a few minutes later, it was gone. The wrapper left behind, fluttering in the dust. He didn't say anything. Neither did she. That evening, after they reinforced the camp, the light changed. It wasn't sunset. It was something wrong. A low vibration hummed in the dirt, too deep to hear but strong enough to feel. The ground had started to thrum like an old generator coming online. Eugene S spine stiffened. He walked to the edge of the ridge and pulled out his battered scope, scanning the horizon. And then he saw it. Just beyond the canyon's edge. Smoke curled upward in tight black spirals, not from a fire, from a flare, ignition, military grade. Controlled, deliberate. Something was powering up in the wasteland, something old and dangerous. He backed away from the ridge. When he turned, she was already standing behind him. Eyes narrowed, her nose flaring. She'd smelled it. She stepped past him and pointed toward the far horizon with one clawed finger. Then she tapped her chest. Not a threat, a memory. Whatever was out there, she had come from it or escaped it. He didn't ask. Not yet. But that night, she didn't sit near the fire. She sat beside him, her shoulder barely touching his, silent, still, but closer than before. ***, long past midnight, the vibration faded, but the air stayed wrong. And sometime before dawn, when he rolled over in his bedroll, he felt her breathing behind him, not hovering, not guarding just there, unwin her breath. Touched the back of his neck, he didn't tense, he let it stay. The sun rose red over the jagged hills, smeared behind dust-heavy clouds like an open wound. Eugene didn't trust the color. The sky had too much memory in it lately, too many things coming back to life that were better left buried. He stood at the edge of their makeshift camp, one boot on a rock, his battered scope pressed to his eye. Movement. Not fast, not reckless, but deliberate. A shimmer of something on the horizon, metal glint, low profile, slow wheels crunching over gravel like teeth grinding through bone. He followed the shape through the lens until it resolved, a rig. Then another. 3 total. Industrial haulers retrofitted with turret mounts and bolted armor. Sky miners maybe. Slavers more likely. This far out, you didn't haul that much steel unless you were planning to either dig deep or bury deeper. His gut tightened. They weren't headed straight for the camp, but close, too close. He lowered the scope and turned. She was already there. Ursella. She crouched near the fire pit, claws flexing, tail low, ears twitching with sharp tension. Her eyes met his, and there was no question in them. She'd seen it too. She moved before he spoke, dragging crates into the shadow of the rocks, covering shiny scrap with dusty tarp folds. She moved stiffly, her wound still slowing her, but her hands were precise. This wasn't panic. This was survival. Routine. Ritual. She'd done this before. So had he. He stomped out the fire, the last of the flames hissing into ash. He covered the embers with crushed stone, checking the wind to make sure no smoke would give them away. Then he crouched beside her and helped collapse the tarp wall, their hands working in sync without words. They dropped the antenna mast, hid the solar plate. Every piece of exposed tech was buried under camo mesh and dried brush. By the time the foe rumble of engines reached them, the camp was nothing but a low smear of junk and rock. Invisible unless you knew exactly where to look, they pressed themselves flat behind the largest OUTCROP. He pointed to the leeward side of the ridge, motioned for her to take cover there. But she didn't move. She crouched beside him, eyes forward. UNBLINKING. Watching. Eugene didn't argue. The rigs passed within 200 meters. The lead one bore the mark of a cracked helmet, the symbol of the old mercenary guilds. Not the worst of them, but bad enough. A drone peeled off from the middle truck, lifted into the sky, and began a lazy circle. Eugene tensed. His hand slid to the flare gun. One shot could fry its sensors, but only if it got too close. It DIDN single quotes T. The drone hovered, scanned, then veered off toward the ridge. Trail. They didn't see them. Not this time. He let out a breath like he'd been holding it for years. URSELLA. Didn't exhale. Not yet. When the dust trail vanished over the next rise, they moved again, cautious, slow, like animals checking for traps. She didn't speak. But she walked ahead of him now. Not to lead, but to scout. When they reached the dry stream bed where they'd hidden extra gear, she crouched and sniffed the air. She growled. Low. Soft. He paused. She motioned to the rocks. Small scratches. Not natural. A mark. A sign. Someone had doubled back. Someone had stopped near their camp. She reached into the dirt and pulled out a flare cap. Not theirs. Industrial grade. Fresh. Eugene crouched beside her. Turned the cap over. The bottom was still warm. Someone had set a marker. Near their camp in the night, they weren't just passing through. They were tagging. He looked up. Her eyes were fixed on the canyon. Unreadable. Focused. He said, You think they'll come back? She didn't nod. She didn't have to. They packed. Fast Dot left behind what they couldn't carry. Dot buried the rest under layers of rock and old solar panel shards. The sun was high when they made it to a new outcrop, farther east, tighter, steeper. Dot more defensible. Eugene reinforced the new lean-to while she set trip markers in the dirt using broken sensor wire and cracked motion nodes. She didn't speak, didn't rest. Not until the sky darkened. He built a new fire, small and tight. Not for light, just warmth. She sat beside him. Closer now, not an inch between their shoulders. When he passed her the last ration bar, she didn't hesitate. She took it. Then broke it in half. And handed the other piece back. He didn't thank her, didn't need to. He just ate beside her, the firelight warming both their faces. That night, as the fire settled low and the desert silence returned, she moved. Her bedroll beside his. Not nearby. Beside. Her breathing was slower, deeper. For the first time. He heard it not as threat, not as tension. But trust. And when she shifted in her sleep, her back brushed his chest. He didn't move, just let it be. In the dark, a breeze swept across the canyon and stirred the edge of the tarp, and Eugene realized something had changed. She wasn't just staying, she was choosing. The sky was sick again. Not storm sick, not fire sick. This was different. It had a color that didn't belong. Pale green behind the orange haze, flickering low near the horizon like something was waking up beneath the bones of the world. It wasn't natural. Nothing out here was any more. Eugene saw it first through the edge of his scope, the light rising like a second sun over the western ridgeline. But this wasn't solar. It pulsed. It breathed. Like an old machine coughing itself back to life. He lowered the scope slowly. His chest was tight. Too tight. Behind him, the fire was just coals now, glowing beneath a crust of ash. Ursell stood at the edge of the rocks, watching without blinking. She hadn't moved since the glow started. She didn't ask what it was. She didn't need to. Her body said everything, her fur bristling, her tail drawn in, claws twitching at her sides. The hair at the base of her neck stood straight up. That glow wasn't just strange. It was familiar. He rose, grabbing his jacket and his sidearm in the same motion. "We scout," he said, his voice low. "Nothing close. We stay in the shadows. You smell anything wrong, we turn back." She didn't speak, but she followed. They moved fast, no wasted breath, no footprints left behind. The ground was cracked and veined with old heat scars, remnants of terraformer exhaust that once promised new worlds but instead gave birth to dead soil and blood valleys. Eugene's boots crunched over gravel and bone while Ursula drifted beside him like smoke, silent, alert. Her ears tracked the wind. Her eyes didn't blink. The closer they came, the stronger the vibration beneath their feet. Not sound. Pressure. They crested a low hill and saw it. A terraformer pit. Old, fractured. Its containment field half collapsed, leaving a crater the size of a city block. Rusted catwalks dangled over the edge like snapped ribs. Support pylons still blinked with ancient light, blue pulses running in slow sync through circuits that should have been dead for decades, but something had turned it back. The pit wasn't dormant anymore. As they crouched near the edge of the outer ring, Eugene spotted something worse. Bodies. Not fresh. Not intact. He moved closer, crouched behind a collapsed railing, and scanned with a soft lens light. 2 beastfolk. One slumped against a pillar, throat torn wide open. The other half covered in dust, arm missing, blood dried black against the metal. Eugene's stomach turned, but Ursula didn't flinch. She walked to them with slow, deliberate steps, like every footfall cost something. She knelt beside the bodies and touched their fur, brushed dirt from their faces. Then, with one claw, she drew something into the blood-stiffened coat of the first body. A symbol. 3 points and a curve. Not language. Memory. Farewell. Scanned the shadows. No movement. But his nerves were lit. We need to go, he whispered. This place is wrong. Ursula stood. Her chest was shaking, not from cold. Not from fear, from restraint. Then she turned and walked to a patch of soft dirt and knelt. Slowly, she drew 3 long vertical lines into the ground. Evenly spaced, silent. Then, one by one, she slashed through each of them. Eugene watched in silence. Not 3 enemies. Not 3 dangers. 3 lives. Gone. Her pack. He stepped forward, reached into his pocket, and pulled out a torn piece of cloth. He set it on the ground beside her. She didn't look at it. But her shoulders eased, just slightly, behind them. Something creaked. Metal on metal. Not wind. Eugene spun, eyes narrowing. Movement near the far end of the pit. A shape, humanoid. Armored. Watching. Then. Gone. He grabbed her arm. We're not alone. They backed out fast, keeping low, cutting a zigzag pattern across the ridge to avoid sight lines. By the time they reached their new camp, night had already begun to fall, and the glow on the horizon had faded into mist. They didn't speak, but that night, when the fire was lit, she sat close again, closer than before. She leaned against him. Not with weakness, but with need. And when he didn't move away, she let herself stay. For the first time since she crawled out of the wreckage days ago, her eyes closed, but they didn't sleep. Not really. They waited, because someone had marked that pit, and someone had killed her pack, and whoever they were, they'd just seen her face. The wind didn't howl that morning. It whispered. Low and cold, curling between broken pylons and rust-choked fences like it knew what was coming. The sky stayed dull, heavy with unspoken weight, the kind of stillness that warned the ground wasn't finished bleeding yet. Eugene sat cross-legged near the fire, his eyes scanning the canyon ridge. His weapon rested across his lap, not because he expected a fight, but because he finally did. Ursell hadn't moved in nearly half an hour. She crouched by the fire pit, fingers idly tracing lines in the ash. Her claws moved with no rhythm, like she wasn't drawing anything, just trying to remember how it felt to make marks that didn't mean death. He waited. He knew she'd speak when she was ready. And finally, she did. Just one name, Bravnik. The word hit like a hammer across a frozen plate. She didn't look up when she said it, didn't blink, didn't elaborate. So Eugene waited again until she continued. Iron Pack, she said. Not beastfolk, not human. Something else now. He collects. Collects what? She stared into the fire. What hurts? The story unraveled like thread from a knife-slit bag. He tracked her kind for cycles, back when the terrafields were still pulsing and the syndicates needed bodies for tunnels and tech tests. Some beastfolk joined him. Others disappeared. No one questioned it, because Bravnik always brought something back. Sometimes parts. Sometimes names. Sometimes heads. He took my sister, Ursula said. Her voice didn't waver, not even on that part. Said she had the blood, that her memory could fix broken men. I fought. I lost. Eugene clenched his fists, stared into the fire until it blurred. You think he's the one who reactivated the pit? He asked. She nodded once. Same scent, metal, smoke, heat, same rhythm in the dirt. Eugene pulled the map slate from his jacket. Cracked, slow loading, but still functional. There's a bypass tunnel. East, under the Black Ridge. It cuts through the valley where the rivers used to run. If he's got supply lines out there, he'll have camps, she said, and cages. Then we'll find them. They broke camp faster than ever. Before. No words, just motion. She moved differently now, not cautious, not guarded. Driven. Every crate was lifted in silence. Every tarp folded with care. Her wound had stopped bleeding days ago, but the limp was still there. She didn't notice it anymore. He did. They walked east through narrowing gullies and stone ribs, places too dead for even insects. The land changed as they moved, got leaner, sharper, like it had forgotten how to be gentle. At dusk, they spotted it. Another marker, a steel shard jammed into the side of a pillar, melted at the tip, stamped with a glyph, a spiral of teeth. Eugene didn't recognize it, but Ursula did. She hissed low and stepped back. "That's his," she said. "Bravnik always marks before he takes." They approached cautiously, following the trail. Boot prints, drag marks, not many, but fresh. They were being led. Not hunted, not chased. Invited. By nightfall, they found what he wanted them to see. Relay tower collapsed into itself, surrounded by 3 temporary shelters. Long abandoned, nothing moved, no fire, no food scent, but clear signs of occupancy. And then they found the message, scratched deep into the rusted wall of the relay's core unit. "She's ours." Turn back. The words weren't carved. They were burned into the metal, melted into shape. Eugene stared at them, jaw tight. Ursula stepped forward, raised one claw, and slashed through the first word. She one long line. No rage, no roar. Just rejection. They made camp under a sloped rock that night. No fire, no sleep. Just quiet. She didn't lie near him. Not yet. She sat, eyes open, watching the dark like it owed her something, and when the wind changed, when a distant howl echoed off the cliffs, not warning, but challenge, she stood up. Eyes wide, claws flexed. Eugene was already reaching for his pack. "They're close," she whispered. "Then so are we," he replied. "They didn't run anymore. They hunted. And—" She wasn't limping now. They moved before dawn, when the sky was still a bruise and the wind hadn't yet remembered how to scream. Eugene led the first stretch, weaving through jagged canyons and dust-choked ridges, his eyes locked on the slate. The trail had shifted. Again, not a mistake of design. Whoever was laying these signs wasn't just tracking. They were guiding, shaping the path to make it narrow, tight, dangerous. He didn't speak. Ursula walked beside him now, no longer behind, no longer waiting for permission. Her gait had changed, low, fluid, coiled like a fuse waiting for fire. Her ears were high, twitching at every gust of wind, every insect snap. Her claws clicked once in a while, like a ticking clock with no patience left. They both knew the same truth. Now they weren't walking into a trap. They were choosing it. By noon they reached the rim of the final descent. Below lay a temporary camp hidden behind collapsed power conduits and fractured terrain. Not large. No more than a dozen figures moving in lazy circles. Mercenaries, maybe. Hired hands. But it was what sat in the center that turned Eugene's throat dry. A cage. Not crude. Engineered. Reinforced with shock mesh and grounding nodes. To hold something alive. Something dangerous. Inside it, curled and unmoving, was a small shape. Beastfolk. Younger. Thinner. Matte fur. Long braids. Still breathing. Ursela. Froze. Her breath caught, then twisted into something else. Not a gasp. A growl. It rumbled deep in her chest and didn't stop. Eugene placed a hand on her shoulder. "We'll get her," he said quietly. "But we do this smart." She didn't blink. Didn't look at him. She just stared at the cage like it was the only thing left in the universe. They planned in silence. He would draw the guards toward the southern ridge-high ground, exposed but distracting. She would slip through the broken culvert near the waterline. It was narrow, barely wide enough for her, but it led straight to the cage. Eugene climbed the ridge and pulled a cracked mirror shard from his coat, angled it toward the sun, and flashed. 3 long signals. Pause. Too short. She was in position. He lit the flare, The crack split. The sky like lightning. Shouts echoed instantly. Rifles pointed skyward. Half the guards scrambled uphill. The others stayed. Not enough. Ursella moved like death. Through reeds. She tore through the back fence with one swipe, ripped it open like a curtain, and leapt. The first guard turned too. Slow. She took his throat with one hand and shoved the next into a wall of steel before he even raised his weapon. Eugene fired a second flare, drawing the last two toward him. Camp was chaos. And then he stepped out. Taller than any man Eugene had seen in years, shoulders like tanks. Armor fused from beastfolk hides and metal plate. A horned helmet that gleamed with blood polish. Brv Nick. He held a hammer the size of a generator coil in one hand and a stun lance in the other. You came back, he said, voice cold and cracked like old stone. Should have died with the others. Ursella lowered herself into a crouch. Her eyes burned. Not yellow now, white hot. Give her to me, she growled. Brv Nick smiled. Make me. He charged. So did she. The clash was thunder and teeth. His hammer came down hard. She dodged, rolled, slashed across his thigh. Metal and fur tore. He bellowed and swung wide. She ducked, lunged, drove her claws into his ribs. But the armor held. He backhanded her, sent her flying into the dirt. She hit hard. Didn't rise immediately. Eugene shouted her name, but she didn't answer. Bravnik. Raised the hammer. Eugene aimed. Fired. The round slammed into Bravnik's gut. Not enough to kill. Enough to stagger. Ursella rose. Blood poured from her mouth, but she rose and screamed. She hurled herself forward and struck before he could swing again. Claws drove deep. Through flesh, through plate. Into his chest. He gasped. Once. Twice. Then fell. Silence. Eugene stumbled down from the ridge, rifle raised, scanning. The remaining mercs had fled. Smoke rose from the wrecked fence. The cage was wide open now. Ursell and Melt inside, cradling the younger girl. Her sister. She was barely conscious but alive. Ursella rocked slightly, brushing the girl's hair back, whispering something in a language Eugene couldn't place. Something older. Something soft. Then she turned. And for the first time since he met her, since that growl in the night, since that first step toward the fire, she let her face crack, not with rage, but with grief and with relief. She crawled toward him, blood-soaked, trembling, and pressed her forehead to his chest. He wrapped his arms around her without a word, because none would have been enough. They stayed until the sun dipped behind the canyon edge. The girls slept under Eugene's coat, wrapped in every blanket they could find. The fire burned low. Ursella sat beside it, silent, face still streaked in blood. Eugene offered her the last of their water. She took it with shaking hands. She said my name, Ursella whispered. Just once, Ursella. Eugene nodded. You got her back, he said, but not whole. None of us are. She looked at him. Really looked. And for the first time, she smiled. Just a little, but real. The wind had changed again, but this time it didn't carry dread. It carried silence. Not the empty kind, no. This was earned silence, the kind that settles over a place after screams have faded and ash has cooled. The sky over the ridge had begun to soften, peeling back from burnt orange to a pale, strained blue. Not clean, not yet, but almost. Eugene stood watch near the edge of the ruined camp, rifle across his back, boots planted in the blood-streaked gravel. Below him, the remains of Bravnik's command post smoldered caved in on itself. Twisted metal, blackened armor, scorch marks where the flare had ignited the fuel drum. No one had returned for him. No one dared. Behind Eugene, in the shade of a half-toppled antenna mast, lay Ursella's sister, Ursella, bundled in salvaged blankets. Her breaths were shallow, but steady now, her lips dry, her eyes half-lidded, but no longer vacant. And beside her, always beside her, Ursula. They didn't speak much that morning. Not at first. Too much had already been said in blood and fire. The beastfolk who had been caged, beaten, dragged across half the canyons, they had scattered during the chaos, some fleeing into the dust, others staying just long enough to nod at Ursula before disappearing into whatever life they could still claim. There weren't many. Maybe none, but they left their marks. Small things. A carved stone left beside Ursula's bed. A torn sash tucked under Ursula's elbow. Their way of saying, "You did not fail us." By midday, the three of them were on the femme though. Move again. Eugene pulled together what supplies he could from the wreckage. Half a medkit, 2 power cells, a pulse lantern, 1 half-charged water purifier. Not much, but enough. Ursula didn't wait for permission to lead now. She walked ahead not just to scout, but because the road was hers again. She moved like someone reclaiming a path she'd once crawled through in pain. Now she walked it standing. Ursula rode on a makeshift sled Eugene had rigged from drone parts and cable wire. Her weight was light, too light. But she watched the world now. Her eyes tracked shadows. Her fingers twitched when birds circled overhead. And once, just once, she reached out and touched Ursula's tail. A whisper. Memory. They crossed the second ridge by nightfall and found a hidden stream that hadn't run in years, but still bore the skeletons of old bridges and support towers. They made camp beneath one, lighting a small fire shielded by stone. That night, Ursula ate, just a little, and drank, and slept without coughing. And Ursula didn't sit with her back to the world. She sat beside Eugene. He looked at her in the firelight, at the scars still fresh across her side, at the way her shoulder leaned gently into his, not pressing, not clinging. Just present. You think she remembers? He asked, nodding toward the girl. She remembers everything, Ursula said softly. She just doesn't know where to put it yet. Maybe we help her figure that out. Maybe. A pause. Then, without looking at him, she asked, You, leaving when this is done? He turned to her slowly. You want me to? Her head tilted. One ear flicked. No, then no. 3 days later, they reached the edge of the river valley. Greenery clung to the hills here. The wind wasn't sharp. The sky wasn't red. And in the distance, a shape buildings. Old, worn, leaning. But standing. And people. Eugene spotted solar panels. A wind turbine spinning slowly. Smoke rising from a cook fire. A settlement. They approached cautiously. But when the guards stepped out, they didn't raise weapons. They raised hands. The settlement was quiet. A cluster of homes built from shuttle hulls and prefab scraps, all laced together with cables and cloth shades. No corporate flags, no mercenary banners. Just tired faces, strong hands, and cautious eyes. They were offered food. A place to sleep. Questions came, but not demands. No one here asked where Ursula had come from. No one here cared what she had been. They saw the wounds. They saw the girl. And they saw a man and a beastfolk who walked together, like they had been forged in the same fire. And that was enough. Weeks passed. Eugene fixed solar panels, patched water tanks. Ursula grew stronger. She spoke more now, short words, but steady. Ursula took guard shifts, helped reinforce the outer wall. And in the evenings, when the wind blew soft and the fires burned low, she sat with Eugene on the roof of the old storage unit and watched the stars blink back into the sky. You sleep closer every night, he told her once, teasing. She looked at him and said, I never left. And one night, when the wind had gone still and the valley was wrapped in hush, she reached for his hand under the blanket. Laced her fingers through his and didn't let go, not because of fear, not because of pain, but because she could, because they'd earned this. No one would ever cage her again. No one would ever take from her again, and she would never again sleep in the dark alone. Asterisk, asterisk. She had lost her pack, but she had found her fire, her voice, her way, and as long as she stayed close. She would never be hunted again.